what complicated problem was solved by an amazingly simple solution. I don't know if that happened everywhere, but in France, iodine deficiency was a major public health problem in the mountains and in places far away from the sea because before refrigerated transport, they couldn't have access to seafood. They simply added a little bit of iodine to table salt, and it erased the problem overnight. Iodine in salt, fortified rice, iron in cereal have collectively made a huge impact. Shipping containers. Before the 1950s, shipping goods across the ocean was expensive and chaotic. Every piece of cargo had to be loaded and unloaded manually from trucks, to trains, to ships, which was incredibly time-consuming, and also resulted in a lot of theft, damage, or your goods ending up mixed in with someone else's goods. Malcolm McLean invented a simple steel box that stacks and transfers easily between ships, trucks, and trains. It cut loading time from days to hours, and cut costs by 90% asterisk, and quickly became the standard for global trade. Probably the most underrated investment of the 20th century. People were trying to make ships faster and faster and ended up hitting a plateau. No one thought to decrease the port time. Instead of spending a month at the dock, modern container ships spend 24 hours. British military couldn't get their soldiers to take their doses of anti-malarial. At the time, it was quinine mixed with water and called tonic water. Quinine tastes incredibly bitter, so the soldiers kept getting sick or dying from malaria because they would not drink their daily tonic water. The simple solution was to give the soldiers a ration of gin, which alters the flavor of the quinine. And thus, the gin and tonic cocktail was born. Maybe it's just me, but I like tonic water on its own. I'd imagine that modern tonic water tastes much better than the original stuff, though. Game series Wing Commander used more memory than the base memory limit of the pre-Windows Microsoft Disk Operating System, which means it requires expanded memory management, which is more complex. During development of the first game in the series, there was a defect that after a user exited the game, the expanded memory manager would output a specific error message to the command interface, which looks bad, but is a non-issue because the game is exited. Buy themselves some time to fix the issue while still being able to demo the game to stakeholders. One of the developers edited the expanded memory manager itself to change that one specific error message to thank you for playing Wing Commander. Trying to get all the necessary drivers loaded before Microsoft provided MemMaker was a major pain in the ass. You want joystick and sound. There was a mayor called Jaime Lerner in the southern city of Curitiba in Brazil who was famous for using simple creative solutions for solving third-world urban problems. In Curitiba's slums, where garbage trucks could not enter, he created a Trash for Vegetables program. Residents collected their waste and exchanged it for fresh vegetables grown in city gardens, improving cleanliness, nutrition, and public health at the same time. Clean polluted rivers and lakes, Lerner paid fishermen to collect trash from the water instead of fish in the off-season. This protected wildlife, cleaned the waterways, and still provided sustainable income for the fishermen. Another example is flood control. Instead of building costly concrete canals, Lerner turned flood-prone areas into public parks. These green spaces absorbed excess water during heavy rain and became recreational areas when dry. This solved environmental problems while improving quality of life. Rather than paying for expensive lawn mowing maintenance, he introduced flocks of sheep. Rather than building an expensive underground metro, he developed an overground bus rapid transit system on dedicated roads with stations that moved the same amount of people at 1/6 of the cost. One problem was lining the bus exactly up with pedestrian bus stations, which his foreign consultants had many expensive technology solutions. He solved it with a pencil marking. Ecuador did something similar, allow people to turn in trash, recyclables for bus tokens. Cities got cleaner, the less fortunate were more able to travel more freely, thus getting better jobs and helping them on their feet. This coincided with the country cracking down on imports of single-use plastic and has been wildly successful. Airports were frequently dealing with pissed-off passengers who were able to get off the plane fairly quickly, but I hated the long wait for their bags. They tried to hire more staff to speed it up. They tried to move the belts faster, but people were still angry and annoyed at the time spent standing around waiting for their bags to be unloaded. The simple fix: just move the baggage claim further from the arrival gate so that passengers spent more time walking. By the time they got to their bags, they were often waiting, and the number of complaints plummeted. Anecdotally, I found the same with extending the estimated time of a flight. I believe it was sometime in the mid-zeros that airlines began getting fined for being late, so it seemed that they just estimated their flights to be longer, which reduces the stress of being delayed. So a flight that was usually supposed to take 2 hours but often took 2:15, you'd be angry at the delay. But if it was estimated at 2:30 and took 2:15, you'd be happy. It's about managing expectations. Edit is to underpromise and overdeliver. Edit. Apparently this is a concept was promoted by Scotty in Star Trek. For the record, I've never watched Star Trek. It's known outside Trekdom too. The Japanese pointing and calling safety standard, Shisakenko asterisk, in the railway industry. By physically pointing at and saying what you're about to do, human error was reduced by almost 85%. It engages more areas of your brain, seeing, speaking, hearing, motion, which act like fail-safes. I've implemented similar habits in real life. I always touch my key wallet phone before leaving the house. Keep my eyes on what I'm working on. I do an okay gesture after locking the door, so I don't forget. We do this in the Navy and call it point, read, operate. The operate part is not done without a very well from the officer in charge. I work at a factory and this is standard practice. We call it a Yosh or Yoshi, also known as a green dinosaur check. You use it if you're checking a packing list, for example. We were missing stuff out in packages, but after we implemented this, and it took a long time to convince people it worked, we improved our error rate by 90% or something crazy. It's not enough to just point though, you have to verbalize it. Aircraft checklists. Before a 1935 crash of a Bomber 17 prototype, pilots just trained on how to do the necessary steps of starting, taking off, cruising. A very experienced test pilot forgot to take off the gust locks before takeoff, a control restrictor so that things don't move around in the wind while sitting on the ground. After the crash, engineers developed the first checklist for each stage of flight, so that each little big item would be sure to be attended to, and so you didn't have to depend on your memory. Medical has gone into using checklists as well. Prevents a lot of med or type errors. Double checking is the way. Manufacturing complex assembly use detailed procedures to decrease error rates, so not quite a checklist, but in the same family. I was surprised when I took my commercial driver license class that checklists for pre-drive the trucks are not only not required, but when you test you can't use them. Seems a missed opportunity for newer drivers at least. I personally build them for any moderately complex activity. I'll do more than once where an error can be problematic. Hook up, detach, drive recreational vehicle for instance. Clean water. A whole bunch of complicated public health issues were solved reduced by controlling city water supplies and making them clean. Clean water laws had a more immediate impact on longevity than vaccines and antibiotics. For vaccines and antibiotics, it takes a generation for the increased lifespan to start showing up in your statistics. The evidence that sanitary water saved lives was clear within a couple of years. Source: Gerald Grob, The Deadly Truth, A History of Disease in America. Hence the saying, plumbers and garbage collectors have added more to human longevity than doctors. Or this statement of fact, the field of sanitation engineering has done more to improve the quality and longevity of human life than all the physicians, and at 1% the cost. Oh boy, this is a personal one for me here. A while back I was working as a lot attendant at a local Honda dealership. The used car manager bought a Honda Ridgeline for himself at an auction. The only real problem with it was it had a broken driver's side rail light. He got the new light and brought it to our garage when we were slow, and my coworker, myself, and the used car manager went to work replacing it. Now, if you're not familiar with the Honda Ridgeline, the tailgate is different from most normal trucks as it can swing out, like a regular door. The hinge for this is on the driver's side, and it just so happens there's a bolt near the hinge that needs to be removed to get the broken tail light out. So we're struggling to get to this bolt for some time. Eventually, the general manager walks in and is all, "WTF are you guys doing here?" So we explain the problem and he jumps in to help solve it. Total of about 40 minutes goes by. I go to look through our tool cabinet for anything that might reach this bolt easier. I find nothing, turn around, and then it hits me. I tell everyone to stop what they're doing, we're all idiots. They look at me confused. I walk over, shut the tailgate, and then drop the tailgate down like a normal truck. Boom, instant and easy access to this bolt. Tail light was changed out 5 minutes later. General manager told me we're not to ever speak of this again. And here you are, not talking about it. Oh, I have a good one. So with lung transplants, an issue has always been, how long can the lungs be out of the donor and still be viable? Traditionally, you store them on ice around 4 degrees Celsius, and 5 to 6 hours is kinda typical for the ischemic time. Longer you start to have issues. This creates many logistical issues. Now there's more and more devices out now that can extend that, keep it warm, pump blood through it, oxygenated, but those are all complex and hella expensive. Turns out, if you just store the lungs in a fridge at 10 degrees Celsius, The ischemic time can be increased to 12 hours or even more without worse outcomes versus traditional cold storage. Wouldn't want a lunch thief eating my lungs clearly labeled with my name or have a bite taken out of them. Man, that day will suck. From Tumblr, scurvy has got to have one of the biggest disease treatment coolness gaps of all time. Like, yeah, too much time at sea will afflict you with a curse where your body starts unraveling and old wounds come back to haunt you like vengeful ghosts. Unless you eat a lemon. Mind the gap warnings on the London Underground, both audio and visual, are generally considered effective due to a combination of frequency, psychological impact, and clarity, which contributes to overall passenger safety despite significant increases in passenger numbers. Women and their newborns dying from infection after childbirth. Solution: doctors washing hands before and after meeting a patient. Forgot the name of the doctor that thought of it, but I remember he was striped of all his titles and sent to an asylum for trying to push doctors to implement this into their practice. Ignaz Semmelweis. This is an old one they tell in management classes. A toothpaste factory has a major issue. The defect rate of boxes being packed for shipment that, through human error, do not have toothpaste inside is too high, greater than 1%. It's leading to significant issues for the brand as customer complaints start piling up. The management team calls in experts from all over. They begin engineering solutions. A scale to measure the weight of the boxes. Hiring a team of checkers to manually vet each employee's packed orders. The potential solutions roll in, as do the potential increased costs for each solution. Then one day, the defects stop. Management is befuddled by this. The fancy experts had not yet implemented any solutions. How could the defects have stopped? Curious, they walk the assembly line to see. Edna, the chief toothpaste packer of 40 years, has made a small change. She set up a box fan on the conveyor belt right before the boxes get placed into the delivery truck. Full toothpaste box, good to go. The breeze from the box fan isn't strong enough to impact it. Empty dud that escaped human notice. The light cardboard is no match for the fan and blows to the floor, safe from being shipped out. The moral of the story in management classes is that listening to your own people is more powerful than hiring experts. But in the possible world, where it's a true story, Edna and her box fan solved a complex problem very simply. This is basically Kaizen. The idea that process change should come from the bottom up, with management empowering the people doing the work to make changes. Ironically, this is where modern-day Agile has its roots. When I say Agile, I'm referring to what it's become, namely Scrum for software dev and Six Sigma for manufacturing. Now all software devs will be thinking WTF. That's nothing like Scrum, and they're right. The reason being that all the charlatans and snake-oil salespeople and Agile evangelists are claiming that their version of Agile does what Kaizen does, but without the core ingredient of process change coming from the bottom up. Why? Because management want change to be top-down, regardless of how often that is proven to be a dumb idea. Small children don't wake up from smoke detector alarms consistently, so researchers created one that just had a woman's voice saying, "Wake up, the house is on fire." It was much more effective at getting them up and out of bed. Smallpox was very deadly. Estimates put the mortality rate for outbreaks somewhere between 20–30%, but with some outbreaks as high as 35%. A few different solutions were tried. In China, powdered scabs could be used to induce a mild case and then immunity, but with a 2–3% mortality rate. Despite the risk, this was considered worthwhile enough the knowledge spread to Europe and Africa. Edward Jenner developed a better solution, using the pus from cowpox infections to inoculate people against smallpox. Vaccine comes from the Latin vacca, meaning cow. Jenner called the stuff he used variolae vaccinae, meaning smallpox of the cow, and the second part stuck. And I was personally involved in. We had dozens of CNC machines all exactly alike and making automotive parts. The engineering team had miscalculated, and the coolant supply was inadequate, causing hundreds of faults daily. Every fault required an operator to manually reset and restart the machine. Those operators were so busy resetting faults that they could not perform other tasks. A friend of mine asked me to help him solve the issue. Went out there together and figured it out in about 10 minutes. We had an engineer add 2 seconds to the pressure switch timer. The coolant switch now waited that little bit extra time before it would fault out, allowing the pressure to build. As soon as all the machines were modified in this way, the faults went from hundreds every day to just a handful. Everybody was super happy, and my friend and I split a Max Suggestion Award, which was $12,500 each. We literally saved the company millions by eliminating downtime and not having to replace expensive coolant systems. Barbed wire was revolutionary for farming. It was cheap and allowed for the erection of large-scale fencing for the first time, ultimately leading to the industrialization of agriculture. Also led to the end of the Wild West, I think. Medieval astronomy came up with epicycles, small circles within a larger circle, to account for inconsistencies in the circular orbits of the planets. At least the maths made sense that way. Along came Kepler and said, "Hey guys, it's an ellipse." Bouncing bombs. They needed to fly at a very low and fairly precise altitude, solved by mounting spotlights under the plane such that the spots would converge at the right altitude. I'm reminded of the anecdote that American astronauts spent all this time and money developing a pen that could operate in zero gravity, when the Russians just simply used pencils. But the truth to that story has been stretched for the joke. In reality, the tiny shards of graphite that could break off from a pencil could go flying through the cabin and eventually find its way into electronics that could short circuit, which could be a huge problem. Not to mention accidentally inhaling them or shards ending up in your eyes. So the Fisher Space Pen uses pressurized nitrogen cartridges to force the ink down, instead of relying on gravity. Ink stays on paper, no more risk of conductive shards of graphite flying all over the place. And as soon as it was available, the Soviets gladly bought it as well for the same reasons. Thank you very much for watching. In the comments, you can share your story, and don't forget to check out other videos on my channel.